yesterday. There was a huge strike yesterday where businesses closed down, a lot of school students stayed home, thousands of people were on the street in below freezing temperatures. It was about minus 30 degrees Celsius in the city when that happened. It was despite the cold, incredibly heated and a lot of tension. And then this morning, local time.
I want to ask you something. I want to ask you something uncomfortable. What happens when the authority that's in place to govern believe that what it's doing is right? And the people that are affected by these actions believe that they're being hurt as a byproduct, as a result. In those moments, who decides what justice looks like in real time? Because when both sides feel that their actions are justified, history does not step in to referee. It does not. History steps in to record the damage. But what happens when the law loses its own legitimacy in the eyes of the people? And at the same time, the protests of the people, they lose their restraint. Not in theory, not on paper, but in the street, in the neighborhood, in the bodies of ordinary people trying to live ordinary lives. What happens when this same show of authority shows up, unafraid to enforce the rule of law, and the people responding to it, responding from a place of brokenness and already being wounded mentally, physically, socially, financially, on every scale of life? Because this is the reality that we're faced with on the individual level and collectively as a country. We have to understand that what's happening right now in Minneapolis, it's not just a protest story. It's not just an immigration story. It's not even just a political story. At its core, it's a human story. And if we don't learn how to read accurately moments just like this, with honesty, courage, and some temperance and self-control, and we don't learn how to read it, history is just going to repeat itself. And the end product will be that history is going to read us instead. What these moments are really asking us to do is asking us, demanding us, requiring us to play the role of the interpreter. Because history won't remember how loud we were. History will remember how clearly we were able to see. And clarity requires discipline. It requires slowing down long enough. Slow down, baby, slow down. Slow down. So we can separate what's really happening from what we're projecting onto it. Follow me. To tell the difference between outrage and understanding. If we rush to judgment, history only records confusion. If we rush to take sides, history will only record the fracture. But if we learn how to read the moment, not just the headline, not just the footage, then we might have a chance to interrupt the pattern instead of repeating the pattern. So before we assign meaning, before we assign blame, we have to begin with what's visible. I want to start at the surface. This is what we see. Federal enforcement taking action, communities in fear, demonstrations and public protests, the escalation of violence and civil unrest, confusion about authority, confusion about responsibility. But we've seen this pattern before, not just in Minneapolis. We also saw it in Ferguson. We've seen this happen in Baltimore. We've seen similar things take place in the city of Los Angeles, in cities where systems of government arrive with a show of force. But by the time they arrive there, the trust amongst the people have already left the building, have already left the consciousness of the people to even be able to respond to it in a correct manner. See, we have to understand this, and I think we get it, but I'm here just to confirm some things, to reiterate some things, so it can be at the front of your mind, your mind's eye, to be able to see this clearly. We have to understand that most civil unrest does not begin with hatred. Most civil unrest begins when fear is allowed to germinate, and that fear is met with silence. Don't say nothing. Keep the status quo. When communities feel like they're being watched, but they don't feel like they're being protected. When communities feel like they're being managed and micromanaged, but they're not being heard. When communities feel like they're being regulated, but they're not regarded, they're being disregarded. This is how they feel. This is when the tension becomes combustible. And once a fire starts, once a fire starts, no one can control what the fire touches. No one can control what that fire touches. A fire does not ask for permission. A fire does not respect intention. A fire spreads accordingly to its own conditions or to the conditions of the environment, the climate, the pressure without relief, the scrutiny without establishing real relationship. That's how the ignition happens. This isn't about justifying destruction, because you can't justify destruction. There's a moral law, there's a spiritual law, there's a natural law that forbids any man or woman, regardless of where you find yourself in the hierarchy of power, the power structure. You can't justify destruction on no side of the aisle. It's not about justifying anything. It's about recognizing how destruction even becomes possible in the first place. Because once things spark, once things finally ignite, the original reason, the original grievance gets lost. The original message becomes distorted. And everyone nearby the fire pays the price, including those who never asked to be a part of the conflict in the first place. And that's why understanding things, what's happening on the surface, that's why these events matter. They tell us how hot, don't touch it, how hot the temperature already was. But the surface level is only a symptom. Family, please hear me out. It's very important, it's very critical for us to understand why the fire keeps returning in the first place. We have to examine what is the source, what is the fuel, what is fanning the flames. And in order for us to do that, we got to go deeper. That path takes us deeper. It forces us to confront the reality and the nature of power itself. And once we decide to take a leap of faith and open up that door, we're face to face with what lies on the other side of our curiosity, our examination into that power. It can be a frightening thing because power can be terrible when wielded by those who are not qualified to wield that power. It can corrupt. It can inflict the ego. It can crush dreams, hopes, beliefs. It can metastasize into a form of spiritual cancer, because that's what power does. Power does not act on its own. It's always looking for a carrier. Power also reveals. Power is a form of revelation. Revelation is power. Because power reveals what the system that's in place really believe about the people. Power reveals just how quickly the authorities will default to force, using force, when they realize that their legitimacy has become thin. And it's amazing. Follow me. Even on this point, history is consistent. We've seen through the historical record, when the people in power, the people with power, lose their moral credibility with the people, they try to compensate for that with control. And when the people lose faith in their institutions, they compensate for that with defiance. And that collision isn't random. It's structural. And it's dangerous. Because once the authority in place is perceived as hostile by the people, that's when resistance becomes an identity. Every interaction with that power structure becomes a test of dominance, not a pursuit of injustice alone. But the pursuit of injustice should and only be the primary frame of reference. The meaning for organizing. But that gets hijacked, and now these interactions, these clashes, instead of pursuing a resolution for any injustice that has been done towards the people, now it has become a clash of wills, a contest of willpower, a test of dominance. And in those moments, justice just disappears. Can't even see Lady Justice no more. I know she got a blindfold on her eyes, but now we can't see her, and we don't even have no blindfold on our eyes, metaphorically speaking. In these moments, the justice disappears, not because people stop caring, but because ego replaces purpose. I told you this is what power does. When ego replaces your purpose, you don't have no restraint. You forget about having self-control. Your behavior is no longer monitored, but is modified by the ego and the cravings, the demands of the shadows in the unconscious mind that finally gets to stop riding shotgun and get in the driver's seat. This is when resistance movements don't care about no consequence. They forget about all of that. And while these different institutions can argue back and forth with each other, and these different movements can clash with each other, regardless of the loss of property, regardless of the loss of life, regardless of the interruption of daily activities, the bedrock of society, there's another cost that's accumulating quietly, a cost that we rarely measure until it's already done its damage, until it's already too late, up until the point finality finally breaks through the cocoon and emerges as a result of bad decision after bad decision stacked on top of each other. And that cost is the human cost. Now let's slow this down. Slow down for a minute. Slow down, please. Slow down. Walk with me. Let us reason together. Behind every protest, there are parents. Behind every badge is a person. Behind every chant sung in unison, there's fear. The fear of loss, the fear of humiliation, the fear of the future or the lack of a future. See, political unrest does something very subtle, very devastating. It normalizes anxiety. Anxiety is a byproduct of fear. Children grow up learning that living with tension, living with stress is normal. Adults teach themselves and learn how to always be hyper vigilant, always expecting something to happen, something to go wrong. At large, the community learns to brace itself for the worst possible outcome instead of reaching for hope. Instead of learning how to breathe, they're holding their breath. And that don't disappear when the headline change. It don't disappear when the news cycle changes and moves on. This becomes inheritance. The cost of civil unrest is not just broken windows, closed down storefronts, pausing the economic lifeblood. No, the cost of civil unrest is broken trust, exhausted nervous systems, everyday people's lives beginning to shrink and collapse, implode from inside out just to avoid conflict. And that's not victory. This is the part that the statistics don't capture. This is the part where the parents have to take a longer route just to get home. This is the part where the shop owner got to close his store early. This is the part where the child get nervous at the sound of a siren. This is the part where the civil unrest teaches people how to brace themselves for the eventuality of violence being done to them or around them to harm them, their livelihood, even it may cost them their lives. And they lose any semblance any silver lining for a chance to repair what was broken, to fix. Yeah. The hope for repairing things is so human. Wanting to fix things is so necessary, such a necessity. And you get to a point in your life where you work so hard to move ahead. You work so hard to gain a foothold in life, to escape the rat race. You put in so much work for yourself, for your loved ones, your career. You put blood, sweat, and tears, your energy, your personal equity. into every area of life, not just to sustain yourself, but to leave a lasting impression and a legacy. And when civil unrest happens, all of that is in jeopardy. It don't even mean anything no more. It gets swallowed up by the tsunami that has been created by the earthquake that you didn't see happening underneath the sea, the waters. And in the Bible, the waters always represent people. This been going on. Plates have been colliding unbeknownst to these people in Minneapolis on the horizon. It's just been happening little by little, little by little. These fault lines. Who's at fault? These little fault lines have been just accumulating. And the end result is people have lost their hope. And when people lose hope, listen to me. When people lose hope in themselves, when people lose hope in other people, that's when exhaustion sets in. That's when the loudest voices in the room are able to steer, not the wisest ones. And that's the problem. We need to turn the volume down on those who want to be loud just for the sake of being loud. And we have to get to a place where we can turn the volume up on wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. And this brings us to the hardest question of all. Don't nobody want to talk about this, but we have to. We're having a family conversation. Wherever you are right now, on whatever part of the globe, whatever city you're in, this is the hardest question of them all. Responsibility. Not partisan responsibility. Not ideological responsibility, human responsibility. Because responsibility does not belong to just one side. The government must ask themselves, have we mistaken enforcement for legitimate methods of control? And the community must ask themselves, are we being informed? Are we informing? Or are we just being inflamed in a state of mental inflammation? And we as the citizens abroad must ask the most uncomfortable question of all. What are we willing to tolerate as long as it's happening to somebody else? What are we willing to tolerate as long as it's not happening to us? What are we okay with seeing happen to other people first, as long as it's not us? And even in this, history is ruthless. History shows us that every society that collapsed did so believing that disorder would never reach them, that disorder would stop, that civil unrest would stop before it reached their door, that it would stop before it reached their business, that it would stop before it reached their neighborhood. But it never does. Civil collapse, people collapsing, the government collapsing never announces itself. It always shows up disguised as somebody else's problem. And as long as we see it being somebody else's problem, we're always willing to tolerate the injustice, tolerate the violence, tolerate the collapsing of society, as long as it's not affecting me and mine, as long as it's not where I live. That's their problem. They got to deal with that, not us. That's exactly our way of thinking. And that's exactly the error that we must correct. Because it's always somebody else's problem until it's not. And history shows us this clearly as well, that when responsibility gets outsourced, instability spreads. Not because everybody is evil, not because everybody just want to raise hell, but because too many people assume that they were exempt. And in that context, responsibility is not a guilt trip, it's proximity. How close are we willing to stand to the truth until it makes us uncomfortable? And that question doesn't stop in Minneapolis. It doesn't stop at one city. It shapes how the entire world sees us. Please hear me. Understand what I'm saying. It shapes how the entire world sees us. And this is the part of the conversation where we must be mature enough to consider the ripple effect. Because what we normalize here, that becomes a precedent somewhere else. And what we excuse here at home domestically becomes justification globally. History doesn't just record events. History records character. And your character is revealed when the pressure is the highest. And all of the easy answers are gone. Which leaves us with one final question. Not about systems, not about politics, but about us. I didn't make this video to tell you what to think or tell you how to think. I recorded this video to invite you. It's an invitation, not to a party, not to celebrate. That'd be cool too, but not right now. I made this video as an invitation for you to see. I want you to see power honestly. I want you to see people fully. I want you to see that you have to refuse making easy villains out of people. You have to refuse making cheap heroes out of other people. I want you to see that peace isn't built by silence. That justice isn't built by fire. That both of them require something harder. Restraint. Restraint. Being able to tell yourself no. The Bible says deny yourself. Being able to listen all the way through. Not halfway, but all the way through. I want you to see the necessity for having moral courage. Interior honesty. I want you to see that tension in and of itself isn't the enemy. It's the unexamined tension that becomes the nemesis. It is a true statement that every generation inherits the unresolved pressure from the previous generation, and that they must decide whether to metabolize it or explode with it. And this holding of tension, it requires patience. Don't nobody want to be patient no more. The world moving too fast. Now patience has become not just a virtue. Now having patience is an art form. The morality of your imagination. Yeah, there's some morality in your imagination. Your imagination is just not an assembly line, a product, a factory of producing evil and harm and destruction and wrong behavior. There's some morality in your imagination. Tap into it. Push through, push past the membrane of these nefarious forces that's luring you, enticing you to do the wrong thing. Tap into your moral imagination. Tap into your light and not just your shadows. This will require courage. This will require humility. But if we don't develop that capacity, history won't punish us. It's just going to repeat. We have to understand this. And we don't want the wrong history to repeat. We can't take pride in history repeating itself if the repetition is producing the unwanted results that have plagued and hunted us since the inception of this country. We also have to look a little deeper. I love etymology of words. I love looking beyond the surface. That's what we do here at Urban Sacred Realism. I'm so glad that you could join me for this video. Minneapolis isn't just a location on a map. Its name tells a story. If you break down the etymology of the word Minneapolis, it literally translates as water and order. Water and order. You can look at that as having flow and law. A city where movement meets control. And now that flow is being constrained without trust. And now that pressure is looking for an exit. And that city sits at the headwater of the Mississippi. It sits at a source. And history shows us what happens at a source once it travels outward through the rivers, which symbolize narratives, as it travels through policy, as it travels through memory. This moment isn't asking us to take sides with nobody. It's asking us to take an account. What have we normalized? What have we excused? What have we turned a blind eye to? What have we learned to live with instead of learning how to heal? History is going to record what happens here, not just in Minneapolis, but wherever things of a similar nature show their head. History is going to record that. That part is unavoidable. History is also going to record how we chose to respond. Whether we chose to have restraint and control over being reactionary, reacting to things. It's going to record that we chose clarity over chaos, or whether we chose chaos over clarity. History is going to also record that some of us chose having a conscience over having convenience. And it's going to record those people that chose to have convenience over having the conscience. Because when the power structure, those in power, those with power, finally meet the people that it governs head on, the question at that point is not who wins the battle. The question is, who have we become? What have we lost? What parts of our humanity may never be recovered again?